It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. The only thing that might match the corruption of the Trump regime is its hypocrisy. Check out this 2023 clip of Kash Patel, Trump's current FBI director, condemning the use of private jets by former FBI leader Chris Wray.
I'm not the defund everything guy. I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off.
This one's even more recent, from May.
We're not the guys running around on private jets. And somebody, maybe in Congress, should ask for how many flights on a private jet Director Comey took, or my predecessor Director Wray took, and how many personal trips they took.
Here's the fun part. We all know that the Trump regime has taken corruption to new levels, but their particular fascination with private jets, including the 747 that Qatar gave to Donald Trump, it's where the corruption and the hypocrisy meet. Kash Patel, after raving against his predecessor's use of private jets, was just busted for using a private jet to go see his girlfriend sing at a wrestling match. And it gets so much worse. I'll let investigative journalist Will Sommer unpack it for us. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. We've got Will Sommer on. He's an investigative journalist, now a senior reporter at the Bulwark and author of the False Flag newsletter, where he uncovers the grifters and the propagandists behind the right wing's massive disinformation machine. Will, the grifters have government jobs now. And they're having a lot of fun, it seems like, with their concerts and MMA fights and their jets, which are flying everywhere. Give us the latest, especially on Kash Patel's flights to Vegas and back.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when these kind of right-wing media figures like Kash Patel get into office, I mean, that brings with it all the sort of the perks and the options that come with being in government. And in this case, we have Kash Patel. I mean, his backstory was that he was so critical of how FBI Director Chris Wray under Trump and Biden, how he used his government jet. That he said, they've got to ground this jet. Chris Wray is using it too much for personal business. But now that that Kash Patel is the FBI director, he's doing much the same, if not more.
What is it with the jets? I mean, I understand they're convenient, but it also feels like they use them as a symbol of something, of status within the government. Maybe it's a signal to their own followers that they've made it, because Kristi Noem has two jets.
I think that this reminds me of when Tom Price, who I think was the Secretary of HHS under the first Trump administration, he got in trouble for jet use. And, someone said at the time that there's something that gets really addicting about private jets. This is obviously a world way beyond, I think, you and I. But perhaps there's something that is just so compelling about flying private that you see kind of politicians repeatedly falling into this trap.
Yeah. And if nothing else, it means they don't have to rub shoulders with the rest of us. That's really what it's about.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're also seeing that, Republicans and administration officials are increasingly kind of trying to withdraw from regular life. We're seeing a lot of them move to military bases in Washington. Stephen Miller just moved to a military base where he joined Kristi Noem and I believe a couple others, on the grounds that they're just so at risk in the blue Washington, D.C. area. There
have been a few headlines about that. Is that, I mean, that seems like a pretty simple explanation. It's just a security thing. How do you understand these relocations to military bases? Because it could have ominous overtones, or it could just be about security.
Yeah, I mean, I think on one hand, I think a lot of these administration officials saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk and they thought, maybe that could happen to me. I mean, I think in some way that's reasonable. On the other, I think you have people like Kristi Noem who seem to really, it's free housing. I think in her case, it's pretty luxurious housing. And so, I think there is this aspect of, and then, by withdrawing from public life, there is this lack of accountability that, people aren't going to see you on the street and yell at you or something like that. But yeah, the Kash Patel situation with the jet, I would say is very unique.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that I have been waiting for, and I hate this feeling of schadenfreude, right? It's petty. It should be beneath journalism. But when the conspiracy machine on the right catches up to the people who started many of these conspiracy theories, when Kash Patel becomes a victim of his own success as a conspiracy theory monger, same with so many people in the government now, it feels like the right is starting to eat itself alive.
Yes, exactly. I mean, look, like obviously the biggest example here would be the Epstein case that is now dragging on and on. And, Kash Patel was someone who was so just, the FBI is covering this up. They have the client list. They won't release it before he was in office. Now that he's in office, he has to say, okay, there's nothing to see here, folks. Let's all move on. And over we see this with the accusations that, FBI agents, did January 6th or, for example, there was this Republicans were very excited about the idea of undercover FBI agents at January 6th. Then Kash Patel had to come out and say, well, I mean, they were responding to the riot. This was not an agent provocateur situation. So over and over, there's this kind of disconnect once these people get in office between the beliefs they had and what they have to do in order to stay at all in touch with reality.
Where's Dan Bongino?
He's really reduced his profile, right? I mean, this is the deputy FBI director. He was doing some kind of snide retweets about my article about Kash Patel's jet use. But otherwise, I mean, he has really, I think, he got the message that people, I think like us, were sort of poking fun at him for how often he was posting, I'm really working hard. Don't be mad at me. I promise we're really going to get to the bottom of all these deep state activities against Trump.
Hey everyone, quick break to tee up a trailer for a new show that I have been dying to tell you about. Chris Goldsmith, audience favorite here, is launching his own podcast. Enjoy.
This is On Offense, and I'm Chris Goldsmith, combat vet, anti-fascist investigator, and founder of Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism. I've spent years infiltrating extremist movements, exposing fascist street gangs, and organizing other veterans to stand up for democracy. And now, we're living in a reality where those same far-right maniacs are getting embedded throughout our federal government. That's why I'm bringing my work here. Raw, direct, unfiltered. Every week on Offense, I'll break down what's happening behind the closed doors of hate groups, how extremist groups are getting closer to real political power, and what it's going to take to stop the next wave of political violence. You'll hear from organizers on the front lines and from veterans who know what real service to country looks like. On Offense is for anyone who's ready to fight for democracy. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to watch our videos, make sure you're following Valor Media Network on YouTube. America's in a fight for its future. Let's go on offense.
The Epstein files. Does that have the staying power that we think it does on the right? It feels different than so many of these other stories that flare up for a second and then disappear. This one, because it's rooted in real truth and it is just so objectively horrifying. It feels like it might stick around and there might actually be accountability someday.
I think that's possible. I mean, I think the most effective storylines that emerge against Trump are often ones that exist within the sort of the right-wing language that they have already said that this is an important issue. So, for example, inflation. We're seeing Trump said the prices would go down. They said the most important thing is prices going down, and that's not happening. And so we're seeing Trump take a hit over that. The Epstein files, again, we saw months and months, years of this talk about we got to release the files. We're going to bust Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, all these Democrats. And of course, when Trump then suddenly says, never mind, get over it. We're not going to talk about the files. I mean, that's a big deal. And I think there are still more shoes to drop here. I mean, just a couple examples. Clearly, Mike Johnson is terrified of swearing in Adelita Grijalva, her becoming a member of Congress, and then finally passing this resolution. And so that still remains to happen. I think there's still so many questions about what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell. We saw House Democrats just release her emails from prison where she's saying, wow, this prison the Department of Justice mysteriously moved me to is so much nicer. And so it makes you wonder, clearly there was some kind of quid pro quo here. And so why did she receive this special treatment? And then is that related to, the interview she gave with Todd Blanche where she said, oh, Trump's totally innocent. I never saw him do anything bad.
Right. What is Mike Johnson's endgame with the Epstein files? Eventually, Democrats will have the majority. Eventually, I would imagine hearings will be held with subpoena power. What is he doing?
I mean, I think we've seen Mike Johnson really is not kind of his own actor. I mean, he's very much just doing whatever Trump wants. So I think the plan here is, I don't think there's a great plan. I mean, maybe he hopes he can peel off a couple Republicans on this resolution to release the files. But as you said, ultimately Democrats will, given last week's election results, I think it's fair to say the midterms are probably going to look pretty good for Democrats. And then they'll have subpoena power. But until then, maybe he can, just kind of delay and delay. But in terms of the staying power of this story, I think, not Republicans, but also kind of like Joe Rogan type independents were really hot for this story, understandably. And then the idea that they have to swallow that Trump, I mean, there's really no good explanation for it. That they have to swallow that Trump is at minimum covering up for people who participated in a pedophile ring. I think that does hurt him.
I hate to reduce this to politics because we have to center the victims in every time we talk about this story. But it feels like the timing is just getting worse and worse and worse for the Republicans. The more they kick the inevitable down the road, the closer we get to the 26 midterms. And I feel like there's just going to be a perfect storm. If last week wasn't a perfect storm, 2026, I think is going to be even worse when you have the convergence of the economy not getting better, actually getting worse, flare-ups internationally around the world. God knows now, war with Nigeria, war with Venezuela, plus the Epstein hearings, which are coming. Is there a single strategist in the Republican caucus who is anticipating what's about to happen?
I mean, I think that's a great point, certainly about the Epstein files, that, this is an issue that's not going away. And the longer you keep those other shoes from dropping, potentially the worse it could be for Republicans. On the other hand, perhaps there's something in those files that's so damaging that they have no choice. They just can't possibly let it come out. And so, certainly the signals we're seeing from the economy are not great. And, I think you're right on the money that this situation is getting worse for the administration. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of legislative plan they have right around the bend that's going to turn that around.
Last question, and it's one I get often, and I sort of brush it off, but I feel like I should be taking it more seriously. How does file management work in the FBI? Is there a chance that these files just disappear, right? If we keep talking about, in sort of a nebulous way, the Epstein files, but if there are documents with Donald Trump's name in them that are highly incriminating, can they disappear?
I think that's very possible. I mean, I think it would be a huge scandal, but I think, ultimately, perhaps I think there are possibly documents that the administration would rather everyone know that they destroyed or covered up than see those actual documents. I mean, we know that Dick Durbin has said he heard from FBI agents that amid this kind of giant FBI review of the files, they were told to flag any documents involving Trump. And if you see Pam Bondi or Kash Patel at these hearings, Democrats will ask, well, was there an effort to flag documents related to Trump? And what happened to those documents? And they will not answer. I mean, there are other questions they get asked that they'll kind of dodge around, but they will just say, how dare you ask me that, you scumbag, stuff like that. So, I mean, there is clearly... there's something that happened there, I think it's fair to say, that they do not want to address on the record.
Yeah, well, I sure hope some brave FBI agent took pictures before those documents went in the shredder. And, it's why we need investigative reporters. Will, thanks so much for joining us. Let's have you back soon.
Thanks for having me.